Hello, hello.
Hey,
This is Biweeklycast. This is episode number 59. Still here. I'm still Dima Malenko.
I'm Slava, and today we are going to talk about routines.
We'll try, right, to talk about routines. I don't know, like, why I'm so cautious about stuff and non-committal. I don't know. Maybe we can debug this a little bit. This time around, I don't have any follow-up, and I wonder what it tells about the state of the world and stuff like that. But one way or the other, no follow-ups this time.
However, there is a thin corner which we have to do before we jump to the topic.
Now that you say we have to do it, I feel like I need to button up, like straighten my back a little bit to report on what's going on. It's interesting, but you might remember that the theme that I'm kind of working with is decoupling. Tangentially, I call it season of decoupling, but it's more than season now. We are almost in June. So it's definitely more than season, and I kind of keep going with it. The idea behind that is for me, to disentangle a little bit my work professional identity from some of the other identities that I have. I keep trying doing that. I don't feel like I made tremendously huge progress in that, primarily because we had at work, it was such an intense period. And this is funny because being affected by intense periods at work is something that I want to solve with this decoupling, kind of to be less affected, because I can clinch to some of the other things I'm doing, like photography, maybe like running and kind of sports, like fitness activities, or kind of being part of Ukrainian community here in London. But then intense periods at work still kind of grab me and do not like still suck me in. So it's still very important for me. I feel like to keep working on that, and the progress I think was not as great. I sort of know what I should be doing, or kind of maybe even like speaking of routines, kind of what new habits I need, or need maybe is too strong a word, but I think I want to build that could help me with all of that stuff. But then in the end of the day, literally in the end of the day, I'm so low on energy. I rarely actually do a follow up on those things. So it's still an ongoing, I shouldn't say struggle, it's still an ongoing process.
And is it work that takes up all of your energy? Or if, for instance, it's a day off and you still do something there and then you feel exhausted by the end of the day, so it's your like overall state that you're just out of energy on average?
It's a little bit of both. So definitely the work itself takes a lot of energy, and maybe even more so. And then on top of that, our daughter goes through exams, like probably the most important exams that she could have, that would allow her to enter university and stuff. A lot of also kind of time and energy goes in supporting her, making sure that she has enough time to study and whatnot, which sort of takes additional time on top of that. And then some of the other kind of household related things that we are going through now also eat into time which leaves. So at least it feels to me, and maybe like it's worth debugging if that's true, of course, but it feels like it leaves so little time to take on or try to take on some new things. And I consciously or subconsciously make decisions, all right, like whatever little precious time I have, I probably would spend it recharging or recuperating a little bit more than usual, because all the other things are kind of so intense, or they feel to be so intense.
Fair enough. And you do have some kind of vacations, days off, like after those periods of time. Does it change, or it seems to be constant, like you just come back and back on?
That's a very good point. Like they say, in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So in theory, you have kind of days of vacation and whatnot, or whatever it might be. In practice, I just realized that I didn't take any days off this year thus far, except for public holidays and kind of my mandated sort of things, which is definitely part of the problem here, but I should take more. So I have no answer to your question. How does it feel different after vacations or days off? I don't know because I didn't take any.
So, what do you see as the next focus of your theme? Like, what would you be working on in the next period?
With the theme, well, I do find, I know you would say that you keep saying this, but it's all like you keep circling back to it, but it does feel like we've went through a little bit of internal kind of restructuring, refocusing, which required a lot of time and attention from my side. We are finally done with this. So I hope that once we've kind of finalized this period, the intensity should decrease and we move into more business as usual territory. That should help, and or at least I will be keeping an eye on that, like turning the current intense period over and go into business as usual territory to make a little bit more time for other activities, and definitely see when is the soonest that I can start taking some days off just to recharge and maybe make more time to pick up new things that I wanted to do but somehow was not able to find time to do them.
So, basically, your next step is just sit and wait until things get settled.
No, like why do you have to be so harsh? Maybe I feel like no, maybe. Oh yes, you tell me. I think it doesn't feel like that to me. I know that it might sound that there are things like work related, professional, that I cannot talk too much about. So there, want to assure you that I'm not sitting still and trying to kind of contain the time and energy that's required there. So I
Yeah,
hope
but
that would be
my point was
helping.
that basically your system is adjusting from changes in the change of priorities to business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
You do have some impact on that, but just some impact. The system overall is moving in that direction. And when it gets there, you will be happier and you'll be able to decouple a bit more, right?
Right. Yeah, I think so.
You can definitely speed it up, but we cannot talk about the specifics.
Yes, and also that there are some things like I said, like the household, some of the household activities that they have certain kind of deadlines, not deadlines, timelines that are not certainly movable, and certain things like my daughter's exams, they will be over at some point, and that would be a relief for everyone in our family. And so there is a little bit of that sit and wait thing, but also I hope cross doing stuff on the professional front that also go in this direction.
Best of luck there.
Thanks. But it's also like helpful, right? When someone from the outside perspective asks you questions which are direct, and then you maybe construct in your head, you construct a picture of reality that is maybe a little bit more rosy and soft towards yourself, but then someone comes in and says like, no, this is this doesn't make any sense. What you're saying means X, Y, Z, and how do you think otherwise?
Best thing about themes that you can't really fail them. And I think in this case, a theme could even be a season of waiting or like a season of doing nothing for a little while, which is still quite a good season.
Right. It is what you make it to be, right? Sounds cool. So then there might be natural, or maybe not so natural transition to this whole idea of routines. And I figured, well, you would know, maybe we can open up a door a little bit and show how the sausage is made. I was a little bit late. I was hesitant and not sure what could be the interesting topic for us to discuss. But then at some point it occurred to me that, wait, like routines, like some of the things I was doing in a professional setting, once again, like switching gears and that all that kind of stuff, which requires building new routines. leaving some of the old things you do behind and start doing new things on a regular basis. That there were some challenges that I went through and still going through, and I thought, like, why don't we talk about or picking up and building new routines that are hopefully beneficial for what you want to achieve with your life and time and what.
Well, I have questions here, not just questions about routines themselves, but about the definitions, because
Right.
you do have a suggestion.
Yes. The definition of routine, right? This is what you're referring to. I would have to confess as well, because you might know that speaking of AIs, in general, yeah, I'm somewhat kind of reluctant to give the keys to the car to AIs, and I try to check and double check and redo things sort of myself. Being somewhat short on time, I typed like Google, like Google, not AI, like Google, what's the definition of routine? Of course, Google is so super helpful. They provide AI overviews at the top of the search results. So it's still AI, and I borrowed this definition from there, where it says a routine is a set of actions regularly followed to create order and structure in daily life. I think there was some sort of a further explanation or expansion of this, but I thought that, like, why not? It seems to make sense a little bit, but looks like you have some objections.
It's not the objection, it's a clarification. Because I think that when people talk about routines, they tend to mix up a number of themes here. And it could be habits versus
Right.
routines. Do we consider habits as just elements of a routine, or habits is something different from a routine?
This is a great question. I also thought that, yeah, where's the definition? Where is the distinction between routines and habits? And now I even think that if we try to dive deeper into this, there can be three things, right? Routine, we say, is it almost feels like you set a sort of schedule or something like that. You know that certain things are going to happen at predetermined times. It may be not at like super fixed time at 9:30 I'm going to do X, but rather every morning I'm going to, I don't know, like brush my teeth or go for a walk with the dog or something like that. So it is sort of predetermined. It can be seen as a routine.
Can we say it's a sequence of events that happens either at specific time or at specific place? Like you come to work and that's a set of things you do at work.
I don't know, because here I was also putting a connotation closer to habit to a routine, where you say that I don't know, like I'm a runner. I have a habit of running and I run regularly. It's not that I run every day. I maybe sort of try to run every other day with long runs on the weekend. Can I call it a routine? Probably yes, but it is also a habit. But then what is a routine then? If it's just, can a routine be a manifestation of habit?
I think routines are probably, like on my professional jargon, there are competencies and skills, and
Mhm.
competencies consist of skills. Sometimes, like negotiating competency consists of argumentation, active listening, something. In this case, you could consider running as a habit if it's just running, and a routine if it's listening to a podcast, coming to a coffee shop, the laundry afterwards, like a number of activities, not just running, but the preparation, the way you warm up, the run itself, if you have some traditions, what you do after the run, if there are some little rituals during the process when you just get to a specific park.
Interesting. I think probably yes. And it may be an example of how maybe trying to be overly precise with something, screwing this thing a little bit, because here we can start asking questions. Because, like, speaking of running, definitely there is an element of routine for me, because normally on a weekday when I run at night, I have a set of predetermined routes that I run, because I know the distance and I choose the distance which I want to go, and I will typically run that route to minimize the distractions and kind of like I have routes that start at my door and and at my door and give me the necessary distance. So that element is there. But then if I go on a business trip somewhere and I still want to run the same distance, I would definitely, of course, naturally go entirely different route, but it can be as simple as I run like 3K forward and then 3K back, which gives me K. Wouldn't we still call it a routine? Is this a routine or habit at that point?
I would call it a habit because, like, for me, a routine is a category of habits. Like, if you remember in Theme System Journal, they had these trackers. And basically, my morning routine consisted of a number of habits. They not always were always happening. Like, I could skip something, there could be rainy days and something, but the morning routine was always there, even if I skipped an element of this routine.
That's interesting. So the routine is interesting. So it looks like what you're saying is that one way, and maybe this is what this definition alludes to, or maybe what I have in mind is like if you repeat something each day.
Not necessarily each day, but on a consistent, regular basis, like every weekend, for instance.
Right,
like
yes.
your Saturdays start like this. Like, let's say on Saturdays, I wake up, I record a podcast, and then I go to Stolichny Market, not far from here, to do the shopping. Of course, I can skip it sometimes. The other month, there could be an event on Saturday that I wouldn't, I would push the recording and not go to the market. But generally, Saturdays are associated with a podcast recording and then going to the market.
And that is a routine.
A Saturday routine, yeah.
But then if I just have a habit of having a long run every weekend, and I typically do that on Saturdays, is it a habit or is it a routine?
In my case, it would be a habit because it wouldn't take an entire category in my checklist. Like the page I mentioned from the Theme System Journal, if there is just a single line there, like brush my teeth or, I don't know, evening reading. Evening reading by itself is a habit, but together the evening routines, they stack up. Like, and you do the offline time, a little warm up, the shower, reading, and something else that together gets a routine. And this routine can even change a bit. Like, there is no hot water for whatever reason. Like, yes, I can switch the shower to something else.
Right. And I think that this is what I try to get at, and it's that in maybe what I had in mind here, I'm looking at this maybe in a context of a singular, particular activity like running, which is repeated periodically, and somehow I sort of call it a routine. Whereas you are saying that let's look at a specific period in time, like Saturday morning, and then there is a sequence of things, sequence of activities. Those activities may be repeated with certain cadence, but what we call a routine is that period between, let's say, 9 a.m. and roughly 10 a.m. on Saturday when I do things XYZ in a particular order, which gives me kind of joy and a sense of stability in life and stuff like that. Yep, I think that this is a very, very cool and interesting distinction. Then indeed, kind of being consistent with something probably is more, you can sort of call it routine, but maybe it's closer to a habit. But then if yep, looking at a set of things that you do as a routine, that would be the word that very naturally comes up in that to describe that sequence of events.
Then there is the third term that I wanted to clarify, which is a behavioral pattern. I think it looks quite similar to a habit because it does have a trigger, a behavior, and some kind of a follow-up. But let's say somebody asks you a provocative question and your typical defensive reaction is asking a question back. You don't understand it, so you just start to reclarifying, double checking, and going deeper and deeper into something. That is not a habit. That is not a routine. That's something totally different, right?
Yes.
Because as I was looking into the note that you suggested today, I had some ideas about that as well, and I wanted to double check whether we are going.
Okay, so I'm now interested in it's like, so behavioral pattern is would be something like almost how do you put it? Somewhat close to subconscious
An
reaction
automatic reaction, yeah, to something.
to something, right? So if you create conditions and then there is a trigger, you respond in a particular way, which is kind of consistent for that set of conditions over time. But how do you see that relating to habits and routines?
For
How does it
instance,
play a
my
role?
old behavioral pattern was after a conflict, I would need some time to procrastinate. Like I would have a difficult meeting and then I can't do any work or anything at all, neither monotonous nor creative. And I would just waste half a day doing nothing at all instead of re-energizing myself, taking a break or doing something. I would just freeze for a little while. And it was a repetitive thing. Like after every conflict that would happen, like after every difficult Zoom conversation or face to face rough thing, I would just freeze for hours. And if we don't consider that a routine or a habit, I think that's totally fine. And we don't have to go there. Just as I was reading about some beneficial and harmful routines, this is something that came to my mind.
This is interesting. Maybe we can double click into that. We just established that behavioral patterns are somewhat subconscious. You do that without maybe even fully recognizing that you are doing something. But then in this particular case, you might want to set up a different habit or a different routine to avoid that behavioral pattern. But then at which point, when you start doing something different after having a difficult conversation, at which point you would stop calling it pattern and
It would
start
probably
calling
still
something
be a
else?
behavioral pattern. It would be a different behavior. So this pattern consists of a trigger, behavior, and a reward, like a habit, basically. It's just that you change the behavior and the reward, because previously my behavior would be procrastination. The reward would be getting a different emotion. Unfortunately, it was an emotion of shame for procrastination, not the best reward, like maybe even the punishment in some regards, but still it worked. Like it would switch me from something painful that I didn't want to feel into something else, which was also quite painful, which is a destructive thing. Like, please don't do that. If you have any control your behavioral patterns, please don't. But you can change the behavior and it leads to different
Right, but you would still call it a behavioral pattern, but a different one. Interesting. But then if you start doing something in response to, let's say, an alarm when you wake up, is it a routine that you do? Did you
there are
have in
just
the morning, or is it a
reactions
behavioral
to
pattern?
something. Like you see a hole on the road and you turn left or right, like you react to some things. These are not the behavioral patterns. I mean, pattern is a bit more complicated. I think it's related to cognitive activities and your choices to do something.
Right, but maybe like for some people it could be that they wake up, and for most of us the alarms that we use now are on our smartphones. You pick the smartphone, you turn off the alarm, and you open, I don't know, like some sort of social media, and while still in bed you start kind of scrolling through, seeing them. Yeah, I can enjoy this. Well,
I
quote
would still
unquote,
call
enjoy
it a
for
habit. I think it's just a bad habit of checking social media first.
but then how is that structurally, how is that different from having a difficult conversation and then doing something?
Different conversations happen without any of my control and understanding, while morning always starts with an alarm. And if I know
See.
that I have a bad habit, I can just put an analog alarm, like that wouldn't be a smartphone. It would still wake me up, but I wouldn't have a phone next to me. And I can consciously choose to do other activities easier because it always happens there. I know the trigger. Here it is, the alarm. Like, let's change something.
And it's
Kind of hard to change the other people who you interact with and the way you don't have much control of the trigger.
okay. So then maybe the distinction would be that with behavioral patterns there isn't this element of unpredictability with the trigger. It may or may not occur, and you are not necessarily ready for it to occur. It can slip subconsciously.
Like every
Whereas,
conversation could end up in a conflict, and you don't really like. You still have to talk to people.
right.
You don't have any, especially right now in Ukraine, like when I come to business meetings, it's always like I'm talking to a new person. Even if we've been working for years, you don't know their emotional state and condition at this conversation and where it's going to go.
Whereas with like routines and habits, the alarm is an alarm. It's always there. You know it that it's going to happen when you go to sleep.
Absolutely. While a phone call is a similar trigger, but you don't really control it because, no, I mean, you do. You can set the notification settings and stuff, but generally an incoming message, an incoming trigger from the outer world and your reaction to it, there are some basic things you can predict. Like there's going to be morning, there's going to be lunch break, and there's going to be evening in your day pretty much always. And these things you can recalibrate and set and control way better than things that happen in between and with all the life and improvisation.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think it should be some sort of a hallmark, or however we call it, of these conversations. We spend a lot of time on definitions, but it always kind of pays off to be precise about what it is that we are talking about. This is so cool. So we have three things that we can keep in mind, and maybe all of us listening to this or participating in the conversation could ask themselves, like, all right, so are we talking about a routine, a habit, or a behavioral pattern when we look at a particular situation? This is cool. This is already interesting and then fruitful enough. I did have some questions or the kind of thoughts or avenues of thought to explore about. Now I'm struggling to say whether it's about routines or habits or maybe even behavioral patterns, but yeah, whatever it is, like we can clarify and cross check what it is. I think one of the common advice that I came across, like in general, right? If you watch one video on YouTube related to self-improvement, inevitably you start getting videos that tell you how to develop new habits and stuff like that. And you may even watch them. They all tell almost the same thing all over. But one of those things that you can come across is that if you want some develop a new routine or a new habit, you need to decide what you need. It could be that you want to form or start forming an identity around it. It's like, say, like, I'm a runner, or I'm so like, or people say that instead of saying I want to lose 10 kilos or something, you better to form or to start forming a routine of exercising regularly. You should think of yourself as, oh, I'm a person who exercises regularly, and kind of this helps things stick, at least in
Doesn't
theory.
make sense.
No? Okay. Tell me how.
Let's take an example of music.
Okay.
I did try to establish an identity of a musician. Like I play music, I have multiple musical instruments.
Mm-hmm.
It never helped. Moreover, it created a lot of shame when I didn't play, or I gave up playing something, or I skipped the training.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I tried to go through such big things like saying I'm a musician, would just give an extra burden.
Mm-hmm.
And only switching from identity to just, I'd like to play some hand drum, that would actually make me move, because I think that an identity is a very strong word and it's really hard to build. And it's usually an outcome of a number of activities and habits that you have, rather than the first thing that you build up an identity and then you create a lifestyle around it.
Right. Yeah. To be honest, I had exactly the same thoughts. It sounds like this particular idea sounds like something that sounds really good on paper. You don't have to do it. That's neat. You tell this to someone, they say, "Try. This is so clever. It would be, yeah. It should work." When you try to make it work, it probably doesn't, or it doesn't work in the way you think it should work. I think with identities, one other element is that oftentimes sort of identities, and with many other things, it's not what you think something is, it's what it actually is. So it's not what you say, it's what you do, kind of a situation. And with identities, I feel like there's a fair bit of social pressure involved when people start seeing you as being a helpful person that they can come with their questions and expect a response of some sort of support. It forms an external identity for yourself, and it might be kind of difficult to get out of that if you want to reclaim a little bit of time. If people think that it's not your identity, or they identify you with the person who unconditionally helps others, it might be difficult to get out of that, even though internally it might necessarily be see yourself.
Plus, identity seems to me like a different level of commitment. Like, to change your identity, you have to actually work a lot, and to build a habit, you don't. Like, to build an identity of a musician versus to play the guitar regularly, that's a very different level of commitment.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Right. It's like that chain of results thing that we keep returning back to. Identity comprises of so many things and multiple sort of steps and things that change to get there. And it even can imply, like, I want to identify as a musician. It implies a lot of things that you might not even expect that are there. That's powerful. So, like, be worried, right, about pulling the identity trick to build new habits. What were the things that you think worked for you when building new or establishing new routines or building new habits if identities didn't work?
I think as we were preparing for points event, I told you about Молодец system.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you reward yourself for making an activity after collecting a number of letters. In this case, well done would be 8 letters, well and done.
Yes.
And you could collect well done for every next step. Let's say I would like to play the guitar. I will put on my whiteboard the number of activities I've done, like the number of practices, and set a reward for a single well done, and let's say 5 well dones. Once I've collected a single well done, I could go and get an ice cream. I like ice creams. That's a nice, pleasant thing. If I practice 5 times, I get an ice cream. Quite a straightforward, direct benefit for doing things that might be not so pleasant as themselves, especially with like musical instruments practice. The first training is usually painful and you don't get the results. It's later on when you start enjoying the process, it kind of becomes a benefit by itself. And when you get more of these well dones, maybe from different habits, maybe from a single habit, but repeated multiple times, you can get something bigger, a steak, or something nicer that makes sense and something you wouldn't probably be doing without it, but you would enjoy it. I think that's one of the first things. And the second is the social commitment, like doing things together with people makes a lot of sense. Like our book club is a good example. I'm not sure how exactly I would keep up reading and listening so many books if not the book club that we have at Biweekly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the use of that's what is it, like the cycle with trigger something else and then the reward. That I want to say there is some sort of name for that kind of thing. Understanding and using it to the benefit of yourself can be indeed really, really powerful. It should be like, I need a little bit of an extra motivation to do this thing. Maybe let me get that ice cream and then I will feel energized and empowered to do this thing. Maybe you want to do it the other way around. Like, let's associate not dreading doing something, but rather like, I've done something and then I have some positive result. What about external? What are your thoughts on external routines, not external routines, externally forced routines? Like, many of us have to go to office and like they do 9 to 5 jobs, or they maybe have kids who have to get to school at a particular time, and all those nice or not so nice things that give a structure to your day, but also it may feel that they eat a bit, or maybe quite a lot, depending on the point of view, into your freedom and ability to express yourself. You know what I'm trying to say? So on one hand, it is a routine, and we started implying a little bit that routines are useful or helpful. This here you have a routine, but many think that these kinds of routines are kind of bad. They are too rigid. They constrain us. We don't like them. Give us freedom.
I think that we could use another definition here, because
Okay.
in my understanding, every habit you get is an external habit.
Also,
They just come from different sources, but like you've learned from running from someone, right? Like someone told you or showed you, or you've seen it somewhere and you decided, why don't I try? Or maybe someone invited you to jog for the first time.
yeah, maybe. I don't remember exactly how it happened for me, but yeah.
Chances are you have not invented jogging, right? Like you
I
probably
didn't.
seen
Yeah,
it and
most certainly.
adopted it
Most certainly.
from somewhere.
People were running since time immemorial, right?
And here I can distinguish things that you must do because there is an instruction, and basically, like, in order to get to the office, you need a security card and you have to bring it with you because you want to get to the office, or you have to check your messengers first because there is a response time. That is a rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I think rules are a bit different from the routines. There are rules that are implied at different positions and jobs, and that you accept when you get into something. Like you go on the road, you accept the traffic rules. You go to the office, you accept the office rules about the noise, some other things that happen in this office as is. You can question them, you can debate them, you can try to change them, but generally it's one thing. And then there are choices that you make proactively. Like, I think we should make our meetings shorter. Like, you want to change the culture, disrupt some things, some habits and some patterns that have been happening in this team. And I generally think that people like things that they came up with, or something that they initiate, more than something that is brought to them, unless there is some trust to the source of this lead. Because if your friend comes with an idea or suggestion, you're quite open. If a colleague you trust comes with an idea, you're also quite open to that idea, and it may become your new routine or habit, especially if it works.
Then if, let's say, you need to get your kids to the school by certain time every day, right? And then in order to make this happen, you have to build a routine for the morning, almost for the entire family to make this happen. So this is the routine, but you build it. I wanted to say not because you want, but because you have to, but then at the same time, well, you want to get your children to the school. So is it you have to or you want to do it? But it feels like more of externally forced thing, right? Or is it just we are being I don't know, complainers?
But that's the matter of your attitude. Like, you could think it as something that is you are forced because it's not your choice. And then you can choose it and do exactly the same thing because you choose it, and the behavior is still the same.
It's like reframing.
I mean, like, somebody faces the rules and says, like, well, we must oblige to the rules. Somebody internalizes the rules and says, yes, I choose to behave like this. It's not because it's written, it's because I like these rules and that's how I'm going to behave. Not because I'll get the punishment or reward, but it's my choice.
I think it can also be a useful mechanism of building those habits, if, like, depending on the personality one possesses, if they want to institute some sort of a habit or routine, they trick themselves into thinking that it is externally forced because they know that kind of externally forced they tend to be a little bit more susceptible to and kind of accept and go along with that. It's like the social peer pressure kind of thing that you said. If you commit to do something with someone, then it becomes not a matter of doing or not doing something, but a matter of upholding the commitment you gave.
I think I remember a very old TED video highlighting 4 types of people, how they react to some external obligations. They were basically entrepreneurs who have to create the rules, Like they accept only things they've created. There were questioners, people who don't accept the rules unless they understand them fully. And if they understand why it is so and how it works, they just accept it and move on. There were rebels who just oppose the rules as a rule, like they don't care if it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. If there is a rule, let me oppose it. And the followers, people who just say like, all right, these are the rules, I accept, let's go.
So then, depending on how you see yourself, you can use rules.
Yeah, and this is changeable. I mean, like you come to the dentist office and the dentist tells you what to do and you follow just because you follow. You don't question, or if it hurts and somebody says, open your mouth, you just open your mouth. Why should I do that?
Can you explain me why I should do this?
Like, could you give me more information on why I should keep my mouth open? Like, nope, that's the doctor says the situation. We are followers here. You can try to rebel, but
They have the power. What about kind of the novelty element, right? We all, every time I say something like this, in the back of my head, I start questioning myself. Should I be saying we all like or love something? But let me roll with it. Many people like novelty and surprises and kind of doing new things. Maybe not all of them. Many like this. And routines or habits are somewhat opposite of that, because the very definition of routine or habit, you're doing the same thing over and over again. Like, what do you make of it? Like, is our innate desire for novelty an enemy of routines, or the routines are the enemy of our innate desire for novelty and surprises?
I could probably distinguish novelty to a tradition rather than to a routine. Let's say I have a routine in the morning which includes jogging, but I can jog anywhere. I have lots of directions from my place and I can change the roads. I can change the intensity. I can change so many things while still jogging. If I have a habit of reading books, I can read anything and it's novel with every new book I read. I can try something else, like I can change the habit to audiobooks to give it a try, but still, like, I can give up a habit if I don't like it. So there are so many factors that change here. On the opposite side, the novelty versus something very well known, like we go to this restaurant every Saturday. It doesn't sound to me like a routine. It sounds to me like a tradition that we go to this specific restaurant every Saturday. If we go to a restaurant every Saturday, it's a routine, but there is an element of novelty because a restaurant could be Chinese, Japanese, French, whatever.
So we introduce a new notion in our conversation, which is a tradition, which makes a lot of sense, right? Maybe the tradition can be seen as a sort of routine, but much weaker one, which only has kind of a vague general shape, but lack rigor and precision of what can be ascribed to a routine.
I would say tradition is very conservative and it doesn't have much variation. Like, I play poker with these 4 dudes every Friday, and if the tradition is strict, it says no new people and just poker, and like that's the only things we do. This is where novelty will probably kick in. However, I know people who love traditions a lot. Like, they need traditions as something to they can build their entire changeable life around. And if, in my case, I go to a specific massage studio for 5 years, even like I've moved twice and I keep going to that massage studio once a week. I change the days, but like that's the thing that keeps me rolling. And basically, there is a single tradition related to some cave places that has survived that long. Most other things have changed.
At which point tradition becomes a routine? Because like having Friday night with dudes playing poker sounds a lot like, yeah, we have this time, we have this activity stuff happening, what we call it a tradition as opposed to routine or habit.
I think in this specific case, it's the time lapse, like because for the first 10 iterations, it is just an initiative. You can say we have a tradition after 6 poker games. Like, it doesn't sound like a tradition yet to me. Tradition sounds more monumental and fixated. Like, my first 6 massage sessions were not a tradition. I just went to a course of massage sessions. Looking back 3 years ago, I was doing this, and now I keep doing this. It seems like so. Probably the time intensity, but it depends.
Could it also be that with tradition, part of the thing is kind of keeping of a tradition, like at least partially tradition exists to kind of perpetuate itself, right?
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of the appeals is there is just, no, we continue doing this thing in and of itself. We don't necessarily look for externalized other benefits that we might.
In most cases, the things are old, like the family holiday dinners or something. Like it's been there forever. Like even before you created your family, you've been part of someone's family dinner, and then you've just brought this tradition, introduced it, and every Christmas you do something, or every Easter you do something.
And then it almost like as if this thing is both justification and reward sort of for itself. Whereas with the routine, you do it regularly, but you brush your teeth before going to bed, not because you are super enjoying it or you don't want to break tradition. You just know that it is beneficial to brush your teeth before bed, and you set up a system that allows you not to miss that particular activity. Oh, that's interesting. Like I started us with routines, and then we broke it down into what routines, habits, behavioral patterns, and now we introduce traditions. I would not be surprised if something else from this general area comes up by the time we end the conversation.
But circling back to your question, I can see a conflict between novelty and a tradition, and I don't see a conflict between a routine and novelty. I think a routine by itself could include so many new things happening every time, so you don't actually get bored.
So routine can be, I go to different restaurant every Friday night.
My wife and I visit a restaurant on Thursday.
A routine can be a routine to seek novelty.
Yeah, sure.
Interesting. I think what I was trying to connect this with this whole idea of reactance. But I think you touched on this a little bit when said how people respond to rules differently, and there are some people who say like, no, I don't accept your rules because they are rules, and I don't accept rules. And it turns out there is this whole psychological theory around reactance and seemingly, well, maybe behavioral pattern, we can call it this way, when people have a tendency to try to regain their freedom, however we define it, when they feel like they're put under constraints. And even though they may initially be acceptable of those constraints, at some point they can develop a no, this I need to get back my freedom, and then they start reacting and rejecting some of those rules or constraints or rituals, or well, ritual, it would be the fifth word that we can throw into the notion.
Rituals.
Which
I think depending on connotation could be either a tradition or a routine to me.
I think the way I would define ritual is something. It would be, yeah, it's a mess. It would be difficult. It may be difficult to differentiate it from a tradition, let's say, but the ritual that to me is something that you do which is not necessarily required to achieve the goal that you set, but you do it nonetheless because it makes you feel good, or maybe gives something. I don't know, like putting a pen, like arranging your table before you start working. Like, is it required? Maybe not. Well, it depends, right, on personality and the different people. But it's not strictly required for you to then take the pen and notebook you neatly arrange.
Sounds like a habit to me. Like most examples of rituals, I think somebody told me they have a ritual of getting a cup of coffee to go during the walk. Like every time they go for a walk, they just grab a cup of coffee. And they like to walk with a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. That's their walking ritual. Sounds like a habit. Then I think about the small talk ritual before the meeting starts. Again, sounds like a habit, but a group habit. Like it's a habit of a team, not a single person.
Would it be fair to say that ritual has a bit to do with a specific way or very specific method of doing thing.
Description how we do stuff.
So like in a case of your friend with coffee, they maybe go to a very specific coffee shop and get very specific kind of coffee in a very specific cup, and they want to keep it this way, as opposed to someone saying, oh, like I have a habit of getting coffee, I get to whatever coffee shop happens to be
Yeah, like
nearby and
for
grab.
instance, I have a habit of listening something to something when I drive.
Right.
And my wife has a ritual of listening to music and quite specific playlists of music while she drives. Like I could listen to an audiobook, to a podcast. I like listening to stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but this stuff is very dependent. I wouldn't say that it's a ritual. It's just like whatever comes to my mind.
Yep. This is so interesting as always, right? That there are, when you start digging into something, you can unearth so many different things, which sometimes can be difficult to differentiate between, but there is a difference between them, and they play, those differences play a role in different situations. We have the, how do we call it? Is it a ritual? Is it a habit? Or is it a routine that we, and in the end of episode, we wish everyone a good week?
That is a ritual that is slowly becoming a tradition because we've been saying it for quite a while now.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Before we do that, before we indulge in that final ritual, any last minute words of wisdom on what we've discussed? Any new thoughts?
Do what you do because if you don't do it, you won't do it.
That's deep. I don't. I don't.
What's your main takeaway from our conversation?
Well, I think kind of, as always, being precise is important, and yeah, the things that I thought of as maybe setting up routines for myself, maybe I should start thinking differently and look at habits or maybe traditions even, and that I think that's, to me, that's the takeaway, to think a little bit deeper about what I want to achieve with establishing some new things. I'm intentionally not saying routine or habit or something like this, and be intentional about that specific thing, and not to fall for the trap of this is a routine. What is there to think about it? Let's go with routine.
Well, then it's about time we say the phrase.
The traditional good weeks.
Good weeks.